Hey there, friends. David Candle ASMR Bringer here. And episode 2 of Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, friends, was about truth, foolishness, and the stories that we tell ourselves about what we're doing in life. Dunk is forced to confront the truth of Sir Arlan of Pennytree and just what it means to be a Hedge Knight. Just as we were all confronted with, well, at least one truth about Sir Arlan, but this video isn't here to make Sir Arlan of Pennytree jokes. Oh no. Oh no. We did plenty of that on the after show live stream. Thanks for those of you who attended. But no, we're here today to follow Dunk as he ponders the gap between the idealized, romanticized version of the Hedge Knight life that Sir Arlan left him with, and the reality of just what Dunk is doing and what Dunk aspires to. Now, it's true that the greatness of Sir Arlan's knighthood gets a bit of a demystification in this episode, both for we the viewer and for Dunk. But the episode ends with this incredibly powerful statement about how tomorrow Dunk will show the world what Sir Arlan's hand has wrought, with all the menacing undertone that one could desire. The truth of Sir Arlan that we're left with when the illusion is cast aside is actually the most important thing to understand about Dunk's story, which is nothing less than, what is it that makes a true knight? The answer seems to be bravery, determination, honor, an unyielding devotion to justice. In other words, the same ideals that left Brienne of Tarth with no chance and no choice, but to face off by herself against 7 bloody mummers in order to, of course, protect an inn full of orphans and young women. As Lord Varys said of none other than Eddard Stark of Winterfell, there's nothing quite so terrifying as a truly just man. And if that man is 7 feet tall and strong as an ox, well, I suppose that's even more terrifying, at least if you're an evildoer. And that is what Sir Arlan's hand has wrought, and what is about to be unleashed at the tourney of Ashford Meadow. A giant hedge knight with nothing to lose, everything to gain, and a sharp sense of right and wrong. So thanks a lot for clicking on my video. Do check out the Dunk and Egg playlist in the description below the video if you want more Dunk and Egg stuff, such as what really happened at Summerhall, videos about Baelor and Aerion and Lionel Baratheon. And if you like this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to the channel. You know, leave a comment, thumbs up, all that stuff. And so now let's talk about how Dunk and all men are both knights and fools. Alright, so as you may have picked up on in the episode, a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is, just as the Hedge Knight did, skillfully comparing the ideas of being a knight and a fool. So first let's talk about what exactly is meant by the word fool. The Fool tarot card is the place to start because George R.R. Martin, as it turns out, is a big fan of the tarot and also of using the tarot to fashion some of the details of his stories, including the in-world legend of Florian the Fool, which is of course the story that Tanzel, Too Tall, and the other puppeteers are acting out in the second episode. They did Serwyn of the Mirror Shield last time, and this time it's Florian and Jonquil. And again, this is just like the Hedge Knight, where George is using the story of Florian the Fool to frame Dunk's story. So the first thing to understand about the Fool card in the tarot is that not all the connotations are negative. As many of you will know, tarot cards have different and somewhat opposite meanings based on whether they are laid right side up or upside down. And most of the things that you would think of first when someone says the word fool or foolish are in fact associated with the upside down Fool card. So that would be recklessness, hastiness, naivete, carelessness, and even boredom and stagnation. Right side up, the Fool denotes new beginnings, adventure, innocence, and the idea of taking a great leap of faith as he is doing as he steps off the ledge. Already, it's pretty easy to see that this is where Dunk is exactly. Certainly a bit innocent and naive, but also idealistic, and certainly at the beginning of a new adventure. Dunk is taking a leap of faith, first of all, by selling his horse and gambling that he'll win a joust and have enough money to buy the horse back, and also because he doesn't even have enough money to ransom his armor back if he loses. Even the simple act of going to the tourney and hoping that he would find someone to sponsor him to enter the lists was an act of faith. So this is absolutely where Dunk is. Dunk himself is essentially wondering, am I being reckless and foolish, or brave, bold, adventurous, and hopeful? Does Dunk's innocence skew more towards naivete and ignorance, or the kind of morally grounded idealism that may very well be right at the core of what it means to be a true knight? There's obviously a lot more symbolism on the Fool tarot card. The Fool has a dog, whereas Dunk doesn't have any dogs, as Egg points out. The black wand has to do with manifesting your dreams from your subconscious mind, which Dunk is doing by attempting to win a joust and become a champion at Ashford Meadow. The fact that many of the items on the Fool card are white, such as the dog and the sun and his undershirt, are meant to represent innocence and a blank slate full of possibilities. There's obviously more to say about the Fool tarot card, but that essentially gives us enough of a background to help us better understand what is meant by the famous lines from the play. All men are fools and all men are knights where women are concerned. So Florian the Fool, who, by the way, draws his floral name from the floral print shirt of the Fool on the tarot card, also says that he is both the greatest knight and the greatest fool, implying that there may not be a contradiction between the two. So the first layer of meaning here is the obvious one. It's a literal description of the way that men act around women, right? Gallant, bold, cocksure, preening and showing off like a bird performing an overwrought mating dance. Or in Dunk's case, just getting straight tongue-tied and being in need of a rescue from his 9-year-old wingman. That's worth a laugh, but obviously there's a deeper meaning, which applies to the idea of knighthood itself. For starters, there's the frontline infantry, don't question orders aspect of being a knight sworn in service to a lord, which is a kind of ignorance or unthinking simplicity. So think about the shitty Kingsguard knights like Boros Blount, who beat a 12-year-old girl because a 13-year-old king lost his temper. Or think about the shitty Kingsguard knights like Gerald Hightower and Jonathan Derry, who basically told Jaime to just ignore it when King Ares was physically assaulting his wife or burning innocent people alive. On a more basic level, we can simply think about the foolishness of risking and sacrificing your health and your body and even your life to work out the petty squabbles of some high lord or king who may not even know that you exist. We should think about the senselessness of war, which George writes a lot about, the absurdity and the way that it churns up the lives of the young men of the realm through combat, and basically ruins the lives of the women and children of the realm by destroying families, fields, harvests, homes, towns, and so on. All of it is quite foolish and again absurd, and the knights and soldiers on the front lines are the ones bearing the brunt of the cost. That's probably why Sir Arlan chose to stay on the move, making few friends and never staying in service to any lord for too long. He seemed to have preferred his freedom, and he probably found it easier to be a true knight when he wasn't acting as the armored fist of some high lord. So yes, he did swear his sword in service to different lords, but never for too long, which gives him the right to walk away if he doesn't like serving that lord. Whereas someone whose entire life is based upon, having a spot at that castle, he has a lot less leverage and a lot less freedom. Dunk recalls that Sir Arlan was a hard man to get along with or a hard man to know, and that may be true to some extent, but I bet that's partially due to the fact that Sir Arlan was perhaps not willing to just do whatever he was told. That is, again, kind of the whole point of choosing to be a hedge knight instead of trying to impress a high lord so that he will permanently take you into his service. So the other main way that knights are actually fools relates to idealism. So doing the right thing, you guys, is not a calculation first and foremost, but rather a pricking of the conscience followed by a need, the feeling that you need to do something. It's the ringing bell of truth that cannot be shut out or ignored by the upright man. And it says, this is wrong. This cannot stand. And then, I must help this person, or I must stand in the gap. This kind of heroism is foolish in that it requires taking action without knowing what the final cost will be. Just like the fool on the tarot card, stepping off the cliff without being able to see what waits below. Now, the calculating strategist may tally the costs of doing the right thing and stay their hand, thinking themselves wise. They see wisdom in compromise, even compromise with and capitulation to evil. They may think altruism of any kind is foolish, and maybe they're right. However, we all work together to create this shared reality that we all live in, and people like that are creating a shitty, dark, cold reality. The reason why we need these idealistically foolish heroes like Dunk or Brienne is because they're willing to stand up when it matters, when it's difficult, and even if they aren't the most qualified person for the job. So consider this. Dreaming of a better world is fundamentally an idealistic act, which is, again, why the Fool on the tarot card has the black wand of manifesting the unconscious, and why he's looking up to the sky as he moves forward. He's dreaming big dreams, hopeful dreams about the future. Because after all, you can't make a better world without first dreaming that it is possible. So once again, you see how a certain kind of foolishness, if you will, is tied to the ideas of hope and bravery and courage. Now, on the flip side, recall that some of the negative aspects of the Fool card include boredom and stagnation. So think of someone who has essentially given up trying to make the world better or even their own life better, and instead cynically accepts corruption and falsehood. Nihilism is the ultimate stagnation, in other words, and it's quite foolish. And of course, these nihilists, these cynical give-up people, they're always the ones speaking up to discourage others when they do try to make the world better. Now, why do they do this? Well, because the hopeful act of someone else trying to make the world better essentially shines an unbearable spotlight on the paucity of their soul, and on the fact that they've given up already. That's why Florian the Fool is written as a romantic. I mean, frankly, we know almost nothing about his stories except that they're everywhere, and that he's some sort of fool who's also a knight of humble birth who fell in love with Jonquil and won her love in return. So Florian is hopeful and aspirational, rising from said humble birth to greatness, and daring to grasp for true love, which is perhaps the most risky and vulnerable thing that one can do. So I hope you can see how the idea of Florian the Fool, a great knight and a great fool, and hopeless romantic, is reflective of these positive, creative, and idealistic aspects of the Fool card. I'm quite sure that you can see how all of this, again, applies to Dunk, who not only aspires to be a champion, but also to win the affection of the puppet girl, even if it was a bit ill-handed. I mean, it wasn't too bad. She is painting his shield. And that brings me to the final thing that I'll say about this sort of foolish hero, which is that they quite often just sort of throw themselves into situations and trust that they'll find a way through luck and intuition, even though they're not prepared or qualified. Dunk essentially does this with Tanzel. You know, I mean, he went and took his shot, even though he knows that he's maybe not the best flirt and has a tendency to get tongue-tied. But the one thing he didn't do is chicken out. Dunk then gets the brave idea to sneak through the servants' hallways like he's Rhaenyra sneaking around the Red Keep in House of the Dragon, hoping that he'll find some way to speak to Baelor, and hoping that Baelor might chance to remember Sir Arlan and sponsor Dunk to enter the lists. That was a pretty ballsy thing to do. I love that line from Maekar. What the is going on here? And then once again, Dunk's initial act to just show up at Ashford Meadow with almost no money and no armor is more of the same. Just throwing himself into the fire and hoping that he'll find a way to not burn. It's very much a fool's leap of faith. But without that leap, there's no journey, no adventure, no hope for a better life, and most of all, no story. Hey, you're supposed to tell me if one of these candles goes out, man. Come on. I don't even know if I failed to light it the first time or if Candle ASMR Bringer. But let's talk about Sir Arlan of Pennytree, and specifically the demystification of Sir Arlan, which is our fandom's own version of The Last Jedi's slightly controversial demystification of Luke Skywalker and the Jedi, which I personally found compelling. And please do feel free to run up my comment count with your 10-year-old TLJ takes. That's good for the algorithm. And the best thing is, I know that you will. I know that you will. All right, so in the books, Sir Arlan is a lot less fleshed out than on the show. And I promise I'm not making a Sir Arlan is well fleshed out penis joke. I'm not, really, I'm not. That just happened accidentally in the script. The point is, Sir Arlan is basically an idealized memory in Dunk's head in the books, about which we get only a few details. We know Sir Arlan's nephew was his first squire and that he died at Redgrass Field 15 years before the Hedge Knight. We know that Sir Arlan essentially adopted Dunk from the streets of Fleabottom and taught him how to be a knight. And we get that one line about Sir Arlan never beating me unless I deserved it, except that one time. It was the baker's boy or whatever. That's all straight from the books. And so the basic history is the same. But what the show has chosen to do is to ask the question, what might these idealized memories of Dunk's actually have looked like? For example, if clouding Dunk upside the head is Sir Arlan's method of discipline, then it's logical to assume that there would have been a lot of cloudings, because Dunk was a feral street kid when Sir Arlan took him on, so he would have had little discipline, but Sir Arlan is trying to teach him to be a squire and eventually a knight. And so I think all these montages of Dunk getting smacked upside the head are canon and make sense. So as I mentioned earlier, we know from the books that Sir Arlan was never rich and never stayed in service to any house for too long, instead preferring the freedom of the road, and from that we can infer that he's probably a bit ornery, stubborn, and idealistic. Sir Arlan was probably not too comfortable around High Lords, I would imagine, or at least we can say not comfortable doing the sort of sycophantic suck-up routine that Lionel Baratheon is talking about to Dunk, when he says, everyone's always trying to curry favor with him. That's kind of why Dunk is interesting to Lionel, besides the fact that he's really tall and muscular, and apparently Lionel's type. But yeah, it's the fact that Dunk isn't coming there to grovel or to kill him, and so Lionel is intrigued. And the point about Sir Arlan is simply, again, by choosing to remain a Hedge Knight, he doesn't have to be concerned with constantly currying enough favor from a High Lord to give him a permanent place in the house. He can always walk away when his service is done. So this is somewhat akin to the difference between working for a company and working as a private contractor in today's economy, where a lot of jobs are essentially private contractor jobs, including mine. That's right, YouTubers are more or less DoorDash drivers. And that's why we do appreciate your support, whether that's clicking the join button or joining the Patreon or just leaving comments. I do appreciate it. I am a small business owner, kind of, sort of. So the point of the comparison, of course, is that as an independent contractor, I have a certain amount of freedom and independence. There's no CEOs that I have to grovel to. There's no corporate ladder for me to try to climb. I have made some enemies in the fandom with my political stances, but again, that's just the cost of doing the right thing as I see it. But then on the flip side, an independent contractor like me obviously has less stability because my income can fluctuate based on, interest level in the topics that I'm covering and whether or not George writes a new book or if the new show is any good or not. And so, at the risk of overgeneralizing, it's pretty similar with Sir Arlan in that on some level, he's trading security for freedom. I mean, consider this. Sir Arlan, he died of a chill that he caught from sleeping outside in the rain, basically. He seems to have been in his late 50s, so it's not exactly live fast and die young, but the timing of his death was essentially the price tag on the freedom that he chose over, living inside. It does seem clear that Sir Arlan was at peace with the choice that he made. Dunk says he never complained and always understood what was expected of him when he took one of these contracts, and that even when he was dying, he just got on with it, businesslike. So there's no clutching, no final regrets. He just realized that his time was up and got on with dying. That shot of Sir Arlan and Dunk eating hard salt beef in the rain under a tree pretty much captures the spirit of the thing. They're not depressed about their situation, but rather finding amusement in the ups and downs of life. So given Sir Arlan's total acceptance of the Hedge Knight lifestyle, it does make sense that he would romanticize it a bit. That's what he's doing as he sings about stealing a kiss from a fair maid at the point of his blade, as he rides through the rain, sick and dying in his late 50s, or when he tells Dunk in the books that rainwater caught in a sweaty Iron Knight's helm is actually the best drink. Yeah, it's the best. Although the show version of Sir Arlan does seem to prefer a different kind of drink, if you know what I'm saying. This is mostly a harmless form of idealism that Sir Arlan is practicing, precisely because he is at peace with his choices and has accepted the road that he's chosen to walk. So he's more or less making the best of it. For Dunk, however, it's quite different because he has yet to make his own choices about how he wants to live. Whereas Arlan's idealism is not ambitious, but rather content, Dunk is very ambitious, despite also being humble. So for example, Dunk hears this story from Donald of Duskendale, how he was just the son of a lowly crabber and rose to the lofty position of Knight of the Kingsguard. I know it turns out his family are actually super duper wealthy crabbers, but that's beside the point. When Dunk is given the story, it's a rags to riches thing, and you can see that Dunk immediately puts himself in that position and starts dreaming big. Right after that scene, Dunk speaks to Egg of becoming a champion at Ashford Meadow and impressing some lord who would take him into his service. Perhaps even House Targaryen, the ruling monarchical family of Westeros. That provokes the very funny just smelled shit look from Egg, as we used to call it at Guitar Center. I used to work at Guitar Center, and when a customer would throw out an insultingly low offer on a nice guitar, we used to talk about the look you give him is like, what? So that's what Egg throws out, and he tartly responds to Dunk, "Do you suppose the Dragon House employs many Hedge Knights, sir?" So check out this passage from the Hedge Knight, which pretty much perfectly sums up Dunk's blend of humility and ambition. And you'll notice that the TV show turned a lot of this Dunk inner monologue into dialogue, which is something I think they're doing a really good job of. Dunk was strong and quick, and his weight and reach were in his favor, but he did not believe for a moment that his skills were the equal of these others. Sir Arlan had taught him as best he could, but the old man had never been the greatest of knights, even when young. Great knights did not live their lives in the hedges or die by the side of a muddy road. That will not happen to me, Dunk vowed. I will show them that I can be more than a hedge knight. So on the TV show, this realization is something that Dunk comes to after seeing that none of these High Lords remember Sir Arlan or his service, and also after Egg's questioning of Dunk forces him to confront the reality of what Sir Arlan was. The montage of Dunk and Arlan scenes at the beginning of the episode, narrated by Dunk's speeches to these various High Lords, does betray the fact that Dunk knows Sir Arlan is not the greatest warrior in the realm. I mean, we can see Dunk getting the best of Sir Arlan in their sparring, while Dunk says, oh, his skills as a warrior were unsung. Unsung. But he had a chin cut from granite, which means that Sir Arlan knew how to take a punch. Dunk also says, oh, he was a dogged fighter, he just kept on coming. And this as we watch Dunk, the oversized squire, knocking Sir Arlan on his ass. It's very much a kind of fool's bravery that Sir Arlan demonstrated and then imparted to Dunk. But Dunk is 7 feet tall, strong as an ox, hungry to prove himself, and armed with a long sword. So the folks at Ashford Meadow would do well not to overlook this giant hedge knight, who will now be armored by Steely Pate, who, by the way, only sells his own work, because that giant hedge knight will just keep on coming until he's totally defeated. And so, what we are left with in terms of Sir Arlan's greatness is not martial prowess, although certainly he did have some amount of skill with the lance in order to be able to take Baelor Breakspear to 4 lances in a tourney joust. And by the way, do check out my Baelor Breakspear video if you want the full story on his amazing life. Instead, Sir Arlan's greatness is in his steadfastness. He took Dunk in as family and treated him as such, even though Dunk was technically nobody to Sir Arlan. As an orphan, Dunk had never had anyone include him like that. He had never had anyone say, you and me, we ride or die together in life. So from that beginning, Sir Arlan taught Dunk that sense of steadfastness, as well as honor, bravery, chivalry, and that dogged determination. He fostered Dunk's idealism and belief in goodness, instead of crushing it with cynical talk the way some adults do. And he gave him a piece of sharp steel and taught him how to use it. So I wish I could play the audio directly from the episode, but that will get me copyright struck. So I will instead read the final lines of the episode, because folks, this is just really great writing. I wasn't his family, but he kept me like we were. He raised me to be an honorable man, and all these noble lords can't even remember his name. His name was Sir Arlan of Pennytree, and I am his legacy. On the morrow, we will show them what his hand has wrought. So yeah, that gave me goosebumps, that gave me chills, folks. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you have enjoyed my attempt to bring something a little different, to the general discussion. We kind of do our breakdown in the post-game live stream, and lots of other people are doing awesome breakdowns and things you missed videos. So I've had fun trying to key in on the archetypes and themes with these mid-weekly videos, so let me know what you think. And if you're looking for a fun place to hang out after the episode ends, of course, come right here to the David Lightbringer YouTube channel, where I'll be live with Greyways Tim and Estella Graves about 5 minutes or so after each episode ends. And if you want an invite to our Discord, which is a super fun and safe place to hang out and talk about all this stuff, then all you have to do is join as a YouTube member squisher with the join button, or join our Patreon at the link in the description below. And by the way, you can even join for free and get a link to the Discord. So with that said, I'll see you on Sunday night, and stay foolish, my friends.